The diner floated like a lonely ember at the edge of the Orion cluster. Its metal walls were scratched, dented, and tired, but it still held warmth, the kind only humans could notice. Inside, the lights flickered softly, casting long shadows across the scattered tables. The few patrons present were a mix of miners, traders, and mercenaries, all moving quietly, eyes darting to the small holoscreens above the bar. Curran Dax sat at a corner table, hunched over a small tray of ration cubes and nutrient gel. He had been traveling for weeks, scavenging wrecked ships, dodging pirates, and trading information for fuel. His supplies were low, and this little meal was the last of it. He tore a cube into pieces and chewed slowly, savoring the dry, metallic taste, wishing for something better. The door slid open with a hiss, letting in a draft of cold, vacuum air and a new presence. Curran looked up automatically. A woman had stepped inside, quiet, poised, and moving with a grace that drew the eye even without intention. She wore a simple gray tunic with no insignia or markings. Her hair was dark, flowing just past her shoulders, and her eyes held a depth Curran had never seen before. Something about her made the chatter in the diner hush, not by force, but because everyone instinctively knew she was not ordinary. She walked to a small table near the back and sat alone, folding her hands neatly in front of her. Curran noticed the emptiness in her meal tray. She carried nothing with her. Perhaps she was waiting, or perhaps she had no hunger. Curran, who had seen all sorts of faces across countless systems, felt a sudden urge to share. It was a human instinct he could not explain, compassion, or maybe curiosity. He stood, taking his tray, and approached her table. "Excuse me," he said, voice low so not to attract attention. "Would you like to share my meal?" "It's not much, but it's all I have." "Humans, we like to share what little we have," he said, shrugging, "even if it's just a few cubes." He had heard humans described as reckless, weak, or disposable, especially by the alien traders he had encountered. Thanks," he mumbled. "I guess." When a burly miner dropped his tray and muttered under his breath about alien taxes, she didn't flinch. When a group of mercenaries laughed too loudly, she didn't react. It was as if the noise and chaos didn't exist for her. "You are not like the others," Curran said finally, unable to keep his curiosity in check. "Who are you?" "You don't seem like you belong here. You offer food to a stranger in a place where strangers are often ignored or worse. Why?" "Not just the food, maybe something else too." He couldn't explain it, but something about this woman made him feel that ordinary rules did not apply. Time passed slowly. Curran finished the last of his ration cubes and leaned back, stretching. "Well, that's it. I hope it helped," he said. "It did," she replied, her voice calm, almost gentle. "You have a rare quality, Curran Dax. Few humans show it, and fewer beings in the universe recognize it. But here I am simply a traveler." Then distant points of light grew larger, moving toward the diner. Ships, many ships, too many for anyone in this part of the galaxy to ignore. Panic rippled through the diner. Patrons whispered and fled, spilling drinks and scattering chairs. Curran's heart raced. Pirates, military patrols, raiders. He had faced all of them before, but never at a place like this. Never while sharing a meal with a stranger who seemed untouched by fear. The woman remained calm, her posture unchanged. She watched the incoming ships with quiet interest, her eyes tracking their patterns with precision. "They come," she said simply, "but they will not harm us. They recognize authority." The woman reached out, lifting a hand slightly, and Curran felt the tension in the room shift. Without a word, the massive fleet halted mid-approach. Lights blinked across their hulls, scanning, then retracting. The tension melted into quiet hesitation. Curran watched, dumbfounded. "They listen because they must," the woman said quietly. "They respect power, even if it is not always visible." He had dealt with planetary governors and small factions, but an entire empire. He had scavenged on the fringes of the galaxy, but he had never imagined meeting someone like this. The diner, once small and mundane, now felt impossibly tiny under the weight of her words. Curran sat back, processing, unsure whether to laugh, bow, or run. She gave him a small, almost knowing smile. "You chose to share your last meal with me," she said softly. "A gesture many would call foolish, yet it is that very gesture that marks you as remarkable. There are qualities in humans I have rarely encountered, and I find them intriguing. It is that instinct, that empathy, that courage that draws me to you." I guess I'm in trouble now, huh?" The other patrons had fled entirely, leaving Curran and Saria alone. He looked at her, a mix of awe and disbelief washing over him. And in that quiet, suspended moment, he realized that sharing his last meal was only the beginning. The galaxy was about to change, and somehow so was he. The fleet of massive ships hung in space like predators circling prey. Curran's stomach tightened, and his hands shook slightly. He had seen ships this large in holovids, floating above rich planets, or in tales told by smugglers and retired soldiers, but never this close and never in such numbers. Hundreds of hulls gleamed under the distant light of a dying star. The hiss of their engines carried through the diner's reinforced viewport. Saria remained calm. Her dark eyes scanned the fleet as though reading a page of text. "They recognize authority," she said again softly, almost to herself. "They understand rank, they know who is in charge, and they respect it." She lifted her hands slightly, and the tension in the room seemed to shift. Curran felt it even from his seat, a pressure that was not physical, yet undeniable. The air felt charged, expectant, almost electric. Then slowly the ships began to retreat. Engines retracted, energy shields lowered, and one by one they vanished back into the darkness from which they came. The noise faded. Silence fell over the diner like a blanket. Curran leaned forward, mouth open. I can't, how? Wait, are you saying you're? Entire fleets ready to destroy him in an instant if she had commanded differently. He laughed nervously, shaking his head. This is insane. I mean me, sitting here, sharing food, and now I'm talking to the Empress of everything. It is your choices, small as they may seem, that define you. That is why I notice you, Curran Dax. I don't know what to say, Curran admitted. I'm just a scavenger. I fix old engines, trade scraps for fuel, I survive. That's it. Why notice one guy eating last night's protein cubes with you? To act when no one else will, to show compassion when it is easiest to ignore, to take a risk without hope of reward. These qualities define humans, and they define you. I don't know if I can do anything important, Curran muttered. I've barely survived this long. I've made mistakes. I've been nothing special. And now what? You're the Empress of 1,000 worlds. You can crush planets if you want. And you're saying I could, what, join you, work for you. Walk among the stars, learn what humans are capable of, and help guide my empire with your insight. I'm just me. I don't know if I could. Every instinct screamed for him to run, to stay small, to survive as he always had. Yet a deeper part of him, the part that had caused him to share his last meal, stirred. Curiosity, courage, the human spark that refused to shrink in the face of the unknown. He looked out the viewport, past the empty space, past the vanished fleet, past the stars scattered across the black void. He imagined 1,000 worlds, civilizations beyond his comprehension, empires built on laws and power, and all the possibilities that lay beyond his tiny life. He began, voice uncertain but firm. I will go with you. Come with me, Curran Dax, and see what humans can achieve. As he approached, Curran felt his old fears rise. He had been shot at, chased, betrayed, and left for dead more times than he cared to count. And yet, he felt a strange calm. Something about this woman, this Empress, inspired trust even though he barely knew her. Saria spoke without turning. Fear is natural, survival is instinct, but you possess something more, Curran. Something alien species rarely understand. Human courage, compassion, ingenuity. He glanced back at the diner, now just a small speck of metal and light, and then forward at the infinite darkness and stars stretching before him. Saria moved beside him, calm and composed as ever. Hold on, Curran Dax. The galaxy you know is only a fraction of what exists. The worlds you will see, the beings you will meet, will challenge everything you believe. But it will also show you what humans are capable of, what you are capable of. Unlike the scavenging runs he was used to, this journey held no deadlines, no threats from pirates, no desperate trades for fuel. Only the vast unknown and the promise of discovery. Hours passed, but Curran did not speak. Words felt unnecessary. He watched as Saria monitored the instruments, silent, commanding, unshakable. The weight of her presence reminded him of why she was Empress of 1,000 worlds. Not by force alone, but by intellect, calm, and authority that radiated naturally, not through fear. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since she revealed her identity. Why me? Why a human? Why not one of your advisors, one of your generals? Why someone like me? And yet here he was, about to journey with the most powerful being in the galaxy, chosen because of the smallest act, sharing a meal. He realized then that being human was more than just survival, more than adaptability. It was resilience, creativity, and compassion in the face of endless darkness, something the galaxy had rarely seen and perhaps something the galaxy desperately needed. The shuttle sped forward, leaving the stars behind, carrying a human who had shared his last meal, and who was about to discover the universe not as a scavenger but as a witness to greatness and perhaps as a force of it. And above him, Saria watched silently, a small, knowing smile on her face. Curran Dax's journey had only begun. The flagship moved through the black expanse like a shadow among the stars. Curran sat in the observation deck, eyes wide, absorbing the immensity of what he had stepped into. Through the massive viewport, he could see worlds spinning silently below, some shrouded in swirling clouds, others glowing with the artificial lights of sprawling cities. Entire civilizations, stretching across planets and moons, each with its own laws, customs, and technologies. He had never imagined anything like it. Saria approached silently, her steps barely making a sound on the metal floor. She stood beside him, gazing at the planets with a calm precision that made Curran feel small yet inspired. "Each of these worlds has its own story," she said softly. "Many are at peace, many are not, and yet all are part of the Empire, all are connected and all rely on balance. That balance is fragile, and even the smallest ripple can change everything. That is how humans can shine, Curran. Others rely on strength or fear. Humans have something different. You see patterns others cannot. You understand choices." The station was alive with movement. Machines that resembled living creatures, beings made of light and shadow, and humanoids with strange features adapted to life in low gravity. The smells, the sounds, even the way the light bent across the hallways were all unfamiliar. Curran felt out of place, but Saria's presence was a shield. No one questioned them. No one challenged their passage. The respect, or perhaps the fear, he had seen from the fleet outside was mirrored here. People moved aside, whispering as the Empress passed. Curran realized that her authority was not enforced by soldiers or weapons alone. It was intrinsic, unquestionable. Saria led him to a council chamber, circular and enormous, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch into infinity. Holographic displays hovered in the air, showing live data streams from dozens of planets, fleets, and civilizations. The air smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Curran's eyes darted from one detail to another, overwhelmed by the scale. "This is where the leaders of my empire convene," Saria explained. "Advisors, generals, and envoys from countless worlds gather here to resolve conflicts, plan development, and protect the balance of power. And you, Curran Dax, will discover your own strength." Military fleets from both sides were on alert, ready to strike at any provocation. Curran swallowed hard. "War over rocks?" he muttered. Saria's expression was unreadable. "Resources are always important, but the conflict is not only about the rocks. It is about pride, history, and fear. The question is whether diplomacy or strategy can prevent bloodshed. That is where you come in. You see patterns others overlook." When it was time to intervene, Curran felt his hands shake. He floated into the council chamber where representatives from both planets waited, their eyes wary, weapons at the ready. Curran's voice was steady, though his heart raced. "I know you believe your rights are being ignored. You both have histories, fears, and pride, but you also share common goals. You rely on trade, on resources, on your people's safety. Look at what unites you, not what divides you." They were ideas that no alien advisor had thought to suggest because they relied on abstract logic, not emotion. Slowly, the tension eased. Leaders nodded, murmured, and finally agreed to a temporary truce, giving Curran a small, private victory. He felt a rush of pride. For the first time, he realized humans had something rare in the galaxy, the ability to see both sides, to act with empathy, and to influence without brute force. Saria observed quietly from the side, a faint smile touching her lips. "Well done," she said softly when the council session ended. "You see what I mean. Humans, even one human, can do what fleets and generals cannot. You are human, that is your strength." Others used harmonic vibrations to convey meaning. Curran learned quickly, relying on intuition, observation, and his human flexibility to adapt. He also saw the darker sides of the Empire. Corruption, greed, and power struggles were everywhere. And yet he noticed something important. Humans could offer clarity where others faltered. A simple human approach, honesty, empathy, and courage was often enough to cut through centuries of mistrust and complexity. One evening, after a long day of observation, Curran floated in a zero-gravity chamber on the flagship. Saria joined him, leaning against the railing as he watched the stars streak past. "You are learning fast," she said, "but this is only the beginning. There are threats you cannot yet see. Some are open and aggressive, others hide in shadows, waiting for mistakes. The galaxy will test you, Curran Dax. It is overwhelming for everyone, even for those born into it. The difference is choice. You choose how to face it. You choose courage over fear, action over inaction. That is what makes humans remarkable." Sharing that simple ration pack had brought him here, to this moment, orbiting a planet far from the edge of the cluster, learning to navigate the politics of thousands of worlds. The first real test came unexpectedly. A distant sector sent a distress signal. A rogue faction had attacked a civilian colony, threatening the lives of thousands. Military fleets could respond, but the political situation was delicate. Any misstep could escalate into full-scale war. Saria looked at him. "You will lead this mission. You will see things they cannot see. That is why you are chosen." Curran studied the maps, the sensors, and the intelligence reports. He considered strategies not for battle alone, but for negotiation, for human solutions that could minimize casualties. Hours passed, and Curran realized that the galaxy was not just about power or technology. It was about choices. The smallest act, a word, a gesture, a shared meal, could ripple across light years and alter destinies. That realization gave him courage. Saria watched him, a faint smile on her lips. "You understand now, do you not? Humanity is underestimated, yet you are capable of remarkable things. You have only begun to scratch the surface of what it means to be human in this galaxy. And that is why you are here. The galaxy is vast, Curran Dax, but humans, you carry a light that even stars cannot match. You are about to see just how far that light can reach." He was a human among 1,000 worlds, chosen not for his strength, but for his courage, compassion, and insight. And deep inside, he knew that the trials ahead would test everything he believed about himself. But he also knew this. Humans, even one human, could change the course of the galaxy. The journey had only begun. The flagship cut through the black expanse of space, silent except for the hum of its engines and the occasional ping of distant communications. Curran sat at a hollow table, studying reports and star charts, his mind racing. The rogue faction Saria had mentioned earlier was more dangerous than he had imagined. They were not just pirates or rebels, they were organized, ruthless, and clever, with networks hidden across multiple systems. Saria moved beside him, silent as a shadow. "You have seen only a fraction of their reach," she said softly. "They are patient, cunning, and willing to exploit weaknesses. Most leaders would respond with fleets and weapons, but humans, you have a different approach. That is your strength." Military fleets had arrived to secure the area, but the rogue faction had anticipated them. Curran studied the reports, noting patterns, the timing of attacks, the choice of targets, the way they avoided confrontation until they could strike decisively. "They're clever," he muttered. "They know how to hit hard and vanish. They plan ahead. They rely on fear and surprise. But humans can anticipate motives that machines and algorithms cannot. You see fear, hesitation, loyalty, pride, all of which they exploit, but you can use the same traits against them. And that human perspective, that ability to understand emotion, choice, and instinct, was what could make the difference between victory and disaster. The first step was to gather allies. Curran worked with envoys from several planets, species he had barely begun to understand. Some were skeptical of a human guiding decisions. Others were cautious but willing. Curran listened to their concerns, asking questions, observing gestures and tones. He discovered that some of the faction's influence came from broken promises and fears long left unresolved. Old grudges and misunderstandings fueled their rebellion. He used this knowledge carefully, arranging discreet meetings and conversations. Humans had a way of connecting, even across species, that relied on honesty and empathy. He spoke plainly, not with military jargon or political threats, but with ideas of fairness, compromise, and shared goals. Slowly, he began to unite factions that had previously been divided, reminding them that their common survival was worth more than personal pride. Meanwhile, the rogue faction continued their attacks, but Curran noticed patterns. They were bold when they expected hesitation, but cautious when faced with coordination. He proposed strategies that used minimal force, focusing on positioning, communication, and psychological pressure. It was not about weapons. It was about understanding human behavior, and in this case, extending that logic to alien allies. As the fleet moved into position near a contested system, Curran felt a familiar tension. The ships of the rogue faction appeared suddenly, just as predicted, attempting to divide the fleet and seize key points. The alien generals were prepared for battle, but Curran stepped forward. "Hold your fire," he said firmly. "They expect us to panic to strike. That is their advantage. Instead, we will use what they cannot predict." Fleets moved as Curran had directed, the rogue faction taking the bait. When they realized the trap, some ships attempted escape, while others surrendered, caught by human ingenuity rather than sheer force. Curran felt a surge of pride. Humans were underestimated in this galaxy, often seen as fragile or impulsive. Yet here he was, using instinct, observation, and reasoning to achieve what fleets alone could not. But the challenge was far from over. The rogue faction's leader remained at large, a figure known only as Verk, brilliant, ruthless, and unpredictable. Curran studied reports of Verk's movements, noting subtle signals and deviations in behavior. Verk relied on fear and surprise, but Curran began to see a pattern. Every attack had an underlying message, a calculated provocation designed to test alliances and loyalty. Curran realized that confronting Verk directly would require not only courage, but insight. He could not fight with weapons alone. He needed to understand Verk's motivations, his fears, his pride. Humans, he remembered, were remarkable not because of strength, but because they could adapt, think creatively, and empathize even with those who opposed them. He proposed a bold strategy to Saria, a direct approach, not with fleets, but with negotiation and subtle psychological tactics. Verk's goal was to destabilize the Empire, but Curran believed he could turn Verk's methods against him. By predicting reactions, leveraging alliances, and showing unexpected human ingenuity, Curran aimed to force a surrender without massive bloodshed. Saria listened, her calm gaze assessing every detail. "It is risky," she said. "You are vulnerable, but humans have achieved the impossible before. I trust your judgment, Curran Dax." "Proceed." He sent messages designed to sow doubt among Verk's followers, highlighting shared goals and the futility of continued rebellion. Finally, the moment came. The rogue fleet gathered near a remote asteroid field, planning what they believed would be a decisive strike. Curran's plan unfolded perfectly. The fleet moved as if retreating, luring the faction into the asteroid field where Allied forces lay hidden. Simultaneously, communication channels opened, carrying human words of reason and understanding, urging surrender before destruction. Verk's forces hesitated, unsure whether to attack or respond to the messages. Curran could almost feel the tension radiating across the void. He understood Verk's pride, his desire for respect, and his fear of betrayal. He crafted every message, every maneuver to exploit these traits, human traits applied across species. Slowly, one by one, the rogue ships surrendered. Curran's insight, rather than weapons, had won the day. He felt exhaustion and relief wash over him. Humanity, small and fragile in the galaxy, had achieved what even the most advanced fleets could not. Saria approached him after the operation, her expression unreadable. "You acted well," she said. "Many would have relied solely on force, causing unnecessary loss. You used understanding, insight, and courage. That is what makes humans remarkable." I just tried to think like a human would, to see what they feel, what they want. I never imagined it could work. You are learning the true power of being human in this universe." He thought back to the diner, to that small act of sharing his last meal, and realized how far he had come. That simple gesture had set him on this path, had led him to Saria, and now, through courage and humanity, he had influenced the course of worlds. For the first time, he felt truly confident in his abilities. Not because he had weapons or fleets, but because he understood that being human, the choices he made, the empathy he carried, the courage to act, was a force greater than many realized. Saria watched him quietly from the observation deck as he stared at the stars. "The galaxy will continue to challenge you, Curran Dax," she said softly. "There will be those who seek to exploit fear, pride, and weakness. But you now understand that humans, even one human, can influence the fate of worlds. That understanding is your greatest weapon." About caring, even when it's hard, even when it's risky. The rogue faction had been only the first challenge. More awaited, threats, conflicts, and crises that would test every lesson he had learned. And yet, for the first time, he felt ready. Humans were underestimated, fragile in appearance, and often dismissed. But they carried courage, ingenuity, and empathy that could turn the tide of empires. Curran had seen it firsthand, and he would continue to see it again and again. The galaxy stretched before him, vast and infinite, full of challenges and opportunities. And Curran, the human who had shared his last meal, would face them all, guided by the simple truth that humans, even one human, could make a difference. He looked at Saria, silent but watchful, and realized that the journey was far from over. There were battles to be fought, alliances to build, and mysteries to uncover. But he also knew that whatever lay ahead, humans had a light that even the darkness of space could not extinguish. And that light was his. The flagship moved steadily toward the outer sector, carrying the combined forces of Saria's fleet and the rogue faction now under careful supervision. Curran sat at the observation deck, staring at the stars, mind racing. The final confrontation with Verk, the rogue leader, was approaching. Unlike previous encounters, this one would not be a simple test of fleets or strategy. It would be a test of insight, courage, and the human qualities he had been learning to trust. Saria joined him silently, her presence calm and commanding. "The rogue leader remains defiant," she said. "Verk believes he can outthink us, outmaneuver us, even outlast us. But humans have something different. They see what others ignore. They act when others hesitate. That is why you are necessary, Curran Dax. You are human, yes, but you carry the insight, empathy, and courage of your species. That is a power few understand. You will face him not as a soldier, but as a human, and that will be enough." The rogue fleet had regrouped, but Verk himself was present, commanding from the largest asteroid, his ship's position strategically. Curran studied the layout carefully. Weapons were formidable, but he noticed patterns, subtle signs of predictability in Verk's maneuvers, small assumptions about the fleet's behavior. "We can attack," one of the alien generals suggested. "Crush them completely. Remove the threat permanently. We show him that resistance is futile in one sense, but in another, we offer him a way to save himself and his people without destruction. We use his pride, his fears, and his sense of logic against him." "Verk," he said, voice steady over the transmission. "This is Curran Dax. I am human, a representative of the Empress Saria. We know your moves. We understand your motives. But you are at a crossroads. You can continue this path and risk everything, or you can make a choice that preserves your people and your reputation. You presume much, human. I do not fear your fleets. I do not fear your words. I am in control here. What makes you think you can sway me? But we are more than that. We understand choice, loyalty, and consequence in ways that machines and armies cannot. Your followers trust you, yes, but they also watch you. They want security, not endless conflict. You can offer them that without more bloodshed, but only if you choose." Then Verk spoke again, softer this time. "And if I refuse?" Curran held his breath. He had never confronted anyone like this before, not with weapons, not with force, only with words, insight, and humanity. Finally, Verk spoke. "You are bold, human. I admit your reasoning is compelling. I will consider your offer, but know this, any betrayal, and you will regret it. But you will see, humanity acts not for fear, but for principles. You can trust that if you make the right choice, you will not be harmed unnecessarily." Saria watched from the flagship's bridge as the rogue fleet complied. "You have done well, Curran Dax," she said. "Not only have you prevented war, but you have shown that humans, one human, can influence the galaxy in ways few can imagine." And it worked. Humans, long considered primitive by many alien civilizations, had prevented what could have been a devastating war. Curran realized, in that moment, the truth of Saria's words. Humans were remarkable not because of strength or technology, but because of choice, understanding, and courage. Saria called a council meeting to acknowledge the outcome. Curran stood beside her as representatives from hundreds of worlds watched. He expected skepticism, whispers of doubt, but instead there was quiet respect. Saria spoke first, her voice calm and clear. "This human," she said, gesturing to Curran, "acted not through power, not through fleets, not through intimidation. He acted through insight, courage, and empathy. He prevented destruction, united allies, and upheld the principles that guide this empire. He is a human among 1,000 worlds, and his actions deserve recognition." He had shared his last meal with a stranger months ago, and now the galaxy acknowledged his actions. One elder from a distant planet stepped forward. "I have observed humans before," she said, voice trembling slightly. "But never with such clarity, such foresight. You have shown that humanity, even one human, can shape the fate of worlds. We owe you gratitude. That is why the galaxy must never underestimate humanity." He realized, finally, what it meant to be human in a galaxy that often dismissed his kind. Humans were resilient, clever, compassionate, and courageous. Even one human could make a difference where entire fleets and empires might fail. After the council, Curran returned to the observation deck with Saria. They floated in silence, watching stars pass by. "You have grown," Saria said softly. From a scavenger who shared his last meal to a human who shaped the fate of empires. Few species could achieve this. Few are still without weapons or armies. That is humanity. There are challenges yet to come, but now you understand what humans are capable of. Courage, insight, empathy, they are forces the galaxy cannot ignore. But he also knew this. As long as he acted with humanity, with courage, and with understanding, he could make a difference. And that difference was profound. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. One human, acting with wisdom, courage, and empathy, had changed the course of history. Curran Dax had proven it, not through weapons, not through conquest, but through the simple, powerful qualities of being human. Saria remained silent beside him, watching. "You have done well, Curran Dax. The Empire acknowledges your actions. Humanity has earned its place among 1,000 worlds." I guess we have." The journey had begun with a small act of kindness, sharing his last meal. And now that small act had rippled across the stars, creating a legacy he could never have imagined. Curran Dax looked out at the galaxy, heart steady, mind clear, and a quiet smile on his face. Humanity had arrived, and he, one human among billions, had shown what it could do.